let's proceed to the topic about the 5 deployments of prisoners. So before we will jump into that discussion, let us first discuss some of few terms regarding this topic. So the Bureau of Justice uh, Statistics explains that jails are only used to hold inmates for a relatively short period of time, usually while waiting for their trial or sentencing. So some inmates who have committed a misdemeanor and been given a short sentence of 1 year or less may also serve their time in jail. So those inmates or those individuals who have committed a crime can serve um, in the jail for less than a year while waiting for the trial, while prisons are long-term facilities that are designed to hold inmates serving sentences of more than a year. So they also house inmates who have committed more serious crimes like felonies. So one more key, the difference between jails and prisons is that jails are operated by local government while um, prisons are operated by or run by a state or federal. So, the 5 levels of security in prisoners are the first, the minimum security. These prisons, sometimes called the federal prison campus, have the lowest security level and are used to house non-violent offenders with a relatively clean record. Some think FPCs resemble college campuses more than prisons since they offer little to no perimeter fencing and prisoners and house in dorm-style units. FPCs typically after-work programs and classes to rehabilitate inmates who are sometimes allowed to work offsite. So this kind or the first level of security for prisoners are those with is the lowest level of security, which is done by or in which the inmates are just allowed to work offsite. So this is for the very minor offense done by an individual. So he or she will be on the main minimum security level. So the second is the low security. Low security facilities still have a strong orientation toward inmate programs, but they do not have perimeter fencing and a higher staff to inmate ratio than FPCs. Some of these prisoners have history of violence, but they must have less than 20 years left on their sentence to be placed in a low security facility. So in this level of security, an individual has to serve more than or less than 20 years, or he or she has already 20 years below left on their sentence. So he or she must be placed in a low security facility. So the third is the medium security. So in the medium security facility, federal correctional institutions of or FCIs are much likely to have violent offenders as inmates. So this is the security level that moves to cell-based housing, more rigorous treatment programs, and perimeter fencing that often includes razor wire with electronic detection system. So in this level of security, the facilities already had the fencing, um, perimeter fencings. So the security level in this part or in this the security level in this part increased. So in their perimeter fencing, it already have includes razor wires and detection systems. So this includes the individuals who have committed violent crimes already. So in the fourth or the high security is the prisons are also called the USPs, or as you might imagine, they provide the highest level of security where inmates are closely monitored by guards and cameras. USPCs are surrounded by razor wire, fencing or walls, and most also have watchtowers. So in this security level, the inmates who have um, convicted here are those who have the highest criminal act or the or the worst criminal act. So in this, inmates are closely monitored, and their facilities already had watchtowers, and their fencing walls have razor wires already. And the last part is the administrative. So this is the special class of prison that encompasses other types of institutions designed to house inmates with special considerations, such as those who are chronically ill, extremely dangerous, or high escape risk. So the administrative level includes the administrative maximum security penitentiary, which is the nation's only supermax prison. So ADX provides extreme security for the country's most dangerous offenders, which prisoners spend most of their time in their cells and are under 24-hour supervision. So this security level incarcerates individuals who have committed the high risk, or the prisoners who committed the much bigger offense. So they are under 24-hour supervision by those administrators. So the let's proceed to the general classifications of prisoners. So the sentenced prisoners, the word sentence has assumed a meaning in our statutes to specially refer to judgment rendered in the court by a criminal case. So a judgment or sentence is final and executory if no appeal lies therefore. So the sentenced prisoner is those that have special meaning, and a judgment or sentence is final. So there is already a judgment on the trial court. While the detention prisoner is a prisoner that is detained when he or she is placed in confinement, or when there is a restraint in this person. Next is the three classifications of the jail inmates. So the first one is the sentenced prisoners, persons who are convicted by final judgment of the crime charged against them. So these are called the sentenced prisoners who have already judgment in their trial. Second is the detention prisoner, or the persons who are detained for the violation of the law and ordinances and have not been yet convicted. So detention prisoners are those that are located in jails, who are still waiting for trial. Then next is the person held for investigation or safekeeping, or that is the term used. Sometimes more prison capacity is needed than what the government can offer. In these cases, local, state, and federal governments will contract a private to operate a person in their behalf. So the BOP reports that about 11% of inmates are currently held in private correctional institutions. So since the government can no longer house a lot of inmates or offenders, so they will hire private correctional institutions for the it is believed that the BOP, or it is said that the BOP initiates 11% of inmates that are placed in private correctional institutions. So in every prison institution shall have a classification board which shall classify inmates in accordance with the correction operational manual. So that would be all in the 5 deployments of prisoners. Okay, so now let's proceed to the forms of punishment. So punishment may take forms ranging from capital punishment, flogging, forced labor, and mutilation of the body, of imprisonment, and fines. So as what I have observed, or what I have discussed earlier, that the by the way, the capital punishment, or the term capital punishment is used when we refer to death penalty. So forced labor and mutilation of the body, of imprisonment, and fines. So this means that the punishment will differ on which system, or in which correctional facility an inmate belongs or incarcerated. The third punishment consists of penalties that are imposed only if an offense is repeated within a specified crime. So The deferred punishments will differ on the offense made, especially if it is already repeated at the same time the same crime has been committed by the same person as well. So the punishment was largely vindictive or retributive, and its prosecution was left to the individuals wronged to or to their families. In quantity and quality of such punishment bore no special relation to the character or gravity of the offense. Gradually, there arose the idea of proportionate punishment, such as reflected in the biblical dictum an eye for an eye. So from this, it developed the biblical term or the biblical, what do you call this, biblical idea, the eye for an eye. So if you have committed a bigger offense, then it will also be done unto you or to your families. Eventually, but then eventually punishment by individuals came under control of the community. Later, with the development of codes of law, the state took over the punitive function for the maintenance of public order. So before the, let's say for example, the eye for an eye kind of punishment has been terminated by the presence or from the from the presence of the law or the existence of the community or the development of the codes of law, and the state took this kind of idea in which the eye for an eye and follow the public order for equal punishment of crime. So we have here different kinds of punishment. So the first one is death punishment. Next is life imprisonment. Third is rigorous imprisonment. The fourth is the simple imprisonment. Fifth is forfeiture of property, and the last is fine. So those kinds of punishment has been applied here in the Philippines. So except that penalty, because it has not been yet approved here. To But before, we have that penalty here in the Philippines, but it has been terminated, and now the Court of the Philippines has been planning to have it back in the Philippines, but it has not yet been approved by the council or from the court. So as what you can see in the picture shown was the different kinds of punishment done before, and this fortunately, or this is what we call the death punishment, in which if a person committed a crime before, it is equivalent to death penalty or the capital punishment, so the general term punishment. So we have here the different kinds of death punishments shown in the picture. So punishment has been a subject to debate among philosophers, political leaders, and lawyers for centuries. Various theories of punishment have been developed, each of which attempts to justify the practice in some form and to state its proper objectives. So, in dealing with this punishment, this is a big idea, or this is a big issue about the philosophers and political leaders, especially in rehabilitation or in the retribution of the criminal acts of an individual in the community. So some of them justify the practice in other form and state its proper objective, because of course you cannot just give or suggest a punishment without its objectives and its benefit, especially because we deal with humans who have committed a crime, and we cannot just kill them just because they have committed a crime without the order of the court, and it has not yet been proven if the person is committed a certain crime. So modern punishment theories date from the 18th century, when the humanitarian movement in Europe emphasized the dignity of the individual as well as his rationality and responsibility. So the modern punishment has been developed during the 18th century, when the Europe emphasized the dignity of an individual. So the quantity and severity of punishments were reduced, the prison system was improved, and the first attempts were made to study psychology of crime and to distinguish between classes of criminals. So the quantity and severity of punishment were reduced because of this humanitarian movement made in Europe, especially in giving punishments to those offenders. So I have also here the different punishment tools that are used before. So we have here the pillory, the iron boot, the scavenger's daughter. Next is the Iron Maiden. Next is the Gossip's Bridle or Brank, the Bastinado, the Jugs, and lastly is the Rock. So those are some of the punishment tools used before. So especially in the capital punishment. During most of the 19th and 20th centuries, individuals who broke the law were viewed as the product of social conditions, and accordingly, punishment was justified, considered only insofar as the first, it protected society by acting as a deterrent or by temporarily or permanently removing one who has injured it. And number two, it aimed at the moral or social regeneration of the criminal. So, as what I have said, the punishment aimed to permanently remove, aimed at the moral or social regeneration of criminals. So, if they believe that if a certain individual has been given the punishment, he or she will be regenerate or will be reformed from a new version of himself in which he already has repent from what he or she has done. So by the latter half of the 20th century, however, many people in Western countries objected to this view of punishment, believing that it placed too little responsibility on offenders for their actions, undervalued the additional deterrent effective derivable from severe as compared with moderate punishment, and ignored society ostensible right to retribution. So the two classifications or the two conditions also, or the punishment was considered justified, has been denied. So we have here some terms. The first is retribution. Retributivists also contend that punishments of offenders by the states satisfies the community's natural demand for justice. Utilitarian theories, this is the main purpose or the main concern of this theory was to deter criminal behavior. So it can only be classified either by general deterrence or individual deterrence. That's utilitarian theory. So next is, let's talk about the general deterrence. So it aims to dissuade others from following the offender's example. So less concerned with the future behavior of the offender himself. General deterrence theories assume that most of the individuals are rational, so potential offenders will calculate the risk of being similarly caught, prosecuted, and sentenced for the commission of crime. So this general deterrence is to calculate the risk of being similarly, or those individuals will be put into the same cell if they are caught or prosecuted or sentenced with the same commission of crime. So the next is the individual deterrence. So for the individual deterrence, it is directed at a person being punished. So from the individual deterrence, the person who have committed the crime will be directed to him, and he or she will be prosecuted and sentenced to either sentenced to death depending on the punishment given to him or her. Next is the incapacitation. This refers to the act of making individual incapable of committing crime, or historically the execution or banishment, and in more modern times by execution or lengthy periods of incarceration. So the term incapacitation is very clear, which refers to incapable. So this aims to give punishment to those individuals who have committed the crime and would be able for they would be able to they will become incapable of committing the same crime again. Next is the rehabilitation, or the last part of this topic, which is the forms of punishment. And of course, this is the last, let's say, process in um, giving discipline to criminal or to offenders. This is to rehabilitate them. So the idea that the purpose of punishment is to apply treatment and training to the offenders so that he or she may be capable to turning to the society and functioning as a law-abiding citizen. So after being retributed or incapacitated, the individuals is expected to have rehabilitated and to follow and to re-enter the community as a law-abiding citizens, and is expected not to commit crime again, or not to commit the same crime or crimes again. So the rehabilitation system established in legal practice in the 19th century, in which it is viewed as a humane alternative to retribution and deterrence, though it did not necessarily result in the offender receiving a more latent penalty that he would have received under a retributive or deterrent philosophy. Though it doesn't receive um, under a retributive or deterrent philosophy, still it helps in shaping an individual again back to its old self, not a criminal but a retributive or rehabilitated person, and would be ready, or it would make him be ready to re-enter the society again as a new member and a law-abiding citizen. So that would be all, and that would be the end of the topic about the forms of punishment.